In one of the last videos of me working on the Rx7, you guys probably saw me pulling the entire wiring harness out of it, and I bet you're wondering why I did it. And I have no other reason for doing that except for the fact that it was made by a bunch of boomer engineers that just hated mechanics, apparently. Now, I'm not necessarily saying I could make something better, but I'm kind of saying that, and we are going to do that. So follow along, this is what we're doing. Alright, so a little bit of an update. I kind of look a little crazy right now because I have been going through a rabbit hole, and I'll show you guys what I'm doing. So I've got the engine harness over here. You guys can see I've got tape on every single connector. I know what every single one does. I got a spreadsheet with every single connector, and I'm filling that out, seeing what every single wire does. Of course, I've got all the wiring diagrams open and everything. As you guys can see, this is actually what I've been working on. I pretty much mapped out the entire topology of that front harness, and I've been trying to figure out how I can optimize it. This is kind of the new topology that I've come up with. Basically, I'm getting rid of any of the stuff that interfaces between the engine harness and this front body harness. So this one specifically is just going to be stuff like lights, turn signals, retractors, and fans, the stuff that I wouldn't have to mess with if I ever pull the engine. Then I'm going to be making an engine harness that has all of the things that I removed from that front body harness included in it, and then I'm going to be moving the battery into the back in one of the bins. My time at the shop is pretty much over for now. I have stayed here the past 2 nights in a row and just been grinding out, trying to learn everything that I can about this big jumbly mess of wires. And yeah, it's ridiculous. I'm pretty sure that if you ask me any single connector on an FC body harness, I could tell you exactly what it's for, exactly where it goes, and all that. It's stuff that I will never have to use since I'm just remaking everything, but it's cool to know. Okay boys, we are now officially at my home garage. I got the entire wiring harness out of the Rx7 in a box, ready to get some modifications done to it. So now that I have pretty much everything planned out that I'm going to be doing to this harness, I'm going to go ahead and start stripping all the sheathing off of it, getting some of the modifications done, and getting a little more documentation on what is actually going to go on with this. So I'm going to put you guys up on a time lapse and we'll get this thing disassembled. So now you guys can see I've got pretty much the entire part that goes into the engine bay unwrapped. This is all going to get cut off, and then I'm going to make separate harnesses that are going to interface into the dash harness. So what I'm going to start by doing is cutting out all of the circuits that I know are not actually going to go back into the harness. Stuff like the washer motor, because this actually has provisions for 2 different washer motors, one on the driver's side and one on the passenger side, so I'm going to get rid of one of those. The active suspension, it's also got connectors for all of that, even though I'm on coilovers and don't need that at all. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut all those out and then see what the harness is reduced to after all that. Then I'm going to peel back all the stuff that I am going to use but is getting relocated, and then I'm just going to go ahead and start cutting and labeling wires so that I can know where to interface them into the big harness. So you guys can see this is the entire front active suspension circuit, which I'm not going to be needing. So that's a good amount of wire that can get the fuck out of my harness. So far I've removed a good amount of the circuits. These are all the ones that are getting relocated. I've got a few over there that are getting removed, and that is the current state of the wiring harness. This is honestly super stressful, but as you guys can see, I have a vast amount of documentation going on my computer to make sure that I don't forget where any of this stuff goes or how any of this stuff is wired. I think I'm just going to skip to the part where everything is taken out of the harness, and then we can start talking about how we're going to plan our new harness. And we are back at the shop. We have the Rx7's harness looking way less finished than it ever did, but that's okay because today we're going to be planning out a lot more of how we're actually going to construct this. So obviously you guys have seen me, I've been pulling out all of the powers, all of the grounds, all of the connectors that I don't actually want in the body harness out of it. So now we're left with pretty much the bare bones harness, which we are going to then convert to something that will actually be able to run the car. So right now I'm going to set this thing up on the inside. We're going to plug pretty much every connector that we can in. Then we're going to be figuring out where I want to cut the front body harness so that I can splice it into a new connector. This is going to be fun, guys. Trust me, it's going to be fun. It looks stressful, and it is, but it's gonna be awesome. All right, so just hear me out. It looks like a lot of shit, but it's really gonna get a lot simpler in a little bit. So what we're looking at is I have my anti-gravity battery set up. This is gonna be our power source for all the stuff that we're gonna be doing. I want to kind of get a feel for what I have to do to get the headlights to both retract and turn on with the wires that are in this section of loom, because this is what we're gonna be cutting, and we're going to be making a firewall connector to go under the fender and come all the way through here. So basically I'm just going to figure out which wires are which and then test it with this. I got a little switch so that I can use it to turn the headlights on and off, and hopefully this will allow me to use the retractors also, but we'll see. I'm going to go ahead and wire this up and see if it works. Okay guys, I think I've done it. So in this giant ball of bundled up spaghetti, I have installed a switch. Just a nice little single pole, double throw switch. And this, when I turn it on, turns on the headlights. Look at that, that looks so sick, dude. I got pop-ups again. Both of them are working. Nice. So those are the new LED bulbs turning on. I'm gonna go ahead and turn these to high beam because I can, and see how bright these are. Look at this. Here we go, here we go, here we go. You guys ready for this? Boom! High beam, baby. Sick. So that realistically is not that much wiring that I have to pull over to the front. The nice thing is that I'm finding out how easily we can simplify this wiring harness. So basically what I'm finding out is that there's only 4 wires that we really need for the headlights to turn on and to actuate. So the 4 that are going to be coming through the firewall are going to be the headlight on signal, the high beam signal, the headlight up and down signal. So those are going to be all that we need to control the headlights going up, down, turning on and off. Which is very nice because instead of having that harness that took up this giant hole in our firewall, we can make a much smaller hole with a nice connector that will house all of the wires that we actually need to run the body. Now I know you guys are probably all wondering why I'm doing any of this, and honestly I'm just trying to simplify the wiring a good amount, and I want the engine bay to look a lot better because we don't actually need all those wires going through there. See, the thing with the stock wiring harness is that they didn't have very good separation of concerns. So we had a body harness that had a lot of engine components going through it. We had an engine harness that had a lot of body components going through it. It was a mess. So I'm trying to separate out each concern to make sure that the body harness only controls body issues, the engine harness only controls engine issues, and then we're moving the power harness to the back because I don't want to see that. So it's going to look a lot cleaner, but right now we're going to have to deal with all of this. Basically, I'm going to have to go ahead and cut this entire section right here, the entire part that goes up to the front, because that's all going to be fed into a new connector that we're going to run through the fender well. Then I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to actually power the entire harness, because as you guys can probably see, I cut my fuse box off. So that's going to be a big old deal, but that is going to be moved over to the back. We're actually going to be using a different fuse box because the fuse box that we had is chunky as hell. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting these wires, getting them all labeled so that I know what they go to and how I'm going to have to wire them afterwards. Then I'm going to make a little bit of a plan of attack for the power harness, because I think that I'm going to put that in the back. I want to utilize one of the bins that the Rx7 has because I never really use them, and it'd be nice to be able to put a battery and a fuse box in there. So I'm going to go ahead and start planning that out, and I'll get back to you guys in a little bit. Now I'm going to go ahead and stuff the body harness back in there, plug all the connectors in, make sure that I know where it's going to be routed so that I can cut those at an appropriate spot. Alright, so this is roughly what the harness is going to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this little strand of wires right about here because this is all the wires that are needed to go up to the front in this harness. That is quite a bit less than what we had in the original harness because the other one had a bunch of engine-based stuff. We don't need that in this one specifically. So I'm going to cut all of those guys. I know this looks like a mess. Believe me, I understand how it looks, but this is probably the biggest believe in the process moments of the build. It's going to look a lot better. Just trust me. I know what I'm doing, and I've got a plan. I got this, all right? This is good. We're going to take care of all of this. All right, boys, it's time for the moment of no return. Here we go. I got my whole stock wrapped up in tape so that it all stays together. And we're about to cut this hoe. I feel like one of those mayors in the movies that cuts the tape, you know, the red tape to allow somebody into a new city. But yeah, so this is all just gonna go to a firewall connector in this general region. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get this a little more organized to make it actually sit where it's supposed to. I've got a couple little pieces of plastic that are supposed to house the harness, and then we'll see what we can do from there. Okay, so I'm over here grinding it out, right? You can see I got this half of the harness that is all pretty nice and zip tied up, where this side still kind of looks like spaghetti. It's a slow process, honestly. It's a lot of work, but we're making some progress, and I think that pretty soon we should have this thing all zip tied up in the way that it's supposed to actually go in the car. Now, once we get it to there, I'm gonna have to start figuring out where I'm gonna go ahead and interface from this harness into the front body harness and into the power harness and the engine harness, because all of that's gonna be different from where it is from the factory. So I'm gonna have to start planning that out a little bit. Other than that, we're pretty close to being done with this section of it. Once I have the main front harness completely like linted out and made sure that all of the signals that I want going through there are only the ones that I need, then we can start just building harnesses, and that's going to be the easy part because we have all the documentation we need about that, how to construct the circuits and all that kind of stuff. But we have to have a nice clean harness to interface to. So I'm just going to keep cracking away at it and see how long that takes to make look decent, you know? Okay, so at this point I've completely routed the harness the way that it's going to go in the car. I have kind of grouped everything together, made it a little more tidy. Now I'm going to go ahead and take it out because I'm going to be taking it home so that I can actually get all the modifications done to it. Alright, we officially got our main harness out of the car, and you guys can see how much more simple this is. So really now you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. I'm talking about separation of concerns, because all of this stuff does not need to be in this harness. So now instead of this harness controlling everything, including lights, engine, a bunch of different stuff, this is basically only going to be interior stuff and signals out to different harnesses. So of course our headlight controls and everything like that is going to be run through this harness but out to the headlight harness. Our engine controls are going to be run through this harness but out to a specific engine harness. And all of the power is going to come into this harness from a specific power harness. That's going to make it super nice because it's going to be a lot more modular. If I ever have to change anything about this, I'm not going to have to change an entire harness. So if I ever end up turboing this thing, putting a Haltech in it or anything like that, it'll be a lot easier because everything's separated. We won't have to touch this harness. We'll only really need to touch the engine harness. So that's gonna be super nice. This harness is a lot smaller than it used to be. But now we can go ahead and take this home, finish it off. But unfortunately, we're not gonna be finishing that today. We're gonna have to push that to another episode. This entire wiring job has been honestly kind of a shit show and a lot more work than I thought I was gonna get myself into. Honestly, I do not recommend it to anybody, but the stuff that we've got going on it's sick. I would not trade it for the world. I'm never gonna do this again. I might do this again. I don't know. Just don't hold me to it, okay? But if you guys like the video, make sure to like it. If you guys have any questions down in the comments, just let me know, and I will see you guys tomorrow.